Someone leaves your life, and nothing dramatic happens. No breakdown, no late night spiral, no sudden urge to text them, just to see if they're still there. You notice the absence, the way you'd notice a chair has been moved out of a room you rarely sit in. But you don't reach for it. Days pass, then weeks, and at some point, you realize you haven't thought about them at all. That realization feels strange, not because you're heartless, but because you expected to feel more human. You expected the grief, the nostalgia, the weight of missing someone. Instead, there's just air. And if you're honest, it feels lighter. I've spent a lot of time wondering why we can genuinely care about someone and still feel absolutely nothing when they're gone. Why certain people leave, people we shared years with, and our system doesn't pull us back toward them. It's easy to tell yourself a story that you're becoming cold, distant, that you're incapable of deep connection. But I think it's simpler than that. Missing someone requires that you were actually there with them in the first place. And most of the time, you weren't. Think about a former colleague you used to see every day, or that friend from college you spent every single weekend with. You traveled together, you shared every meal, you knew the names of each other's cousins. But when they moved away, and the regular calls eventually faded out, you realized you didn't actually miss them. You just missed the noise they filled, the routine of having a body in the seat next to you. Once the noise stopped, you realized the person behind it was someone you never truly allowed yourself to know. When the connection ended, you probably braced yourself for a sense of loss. You expected that phantom limb pain of a missing friendship. But instead, you felt this strange, forbidden kind of relief. Like a debt you'd been paying for years was suddenly canceled. You no longer had to maintain that specific version of yourself that fit their expectations. You didn't have to perform the brand of humor they liked, or carefully avoid the topics that always made them uncomfortable. Their absence wasn't a hole in your life, it was a room that finally had enough air to breathe. You showed up, you responded, you played your part in the interaction with perfect precision. But part of you stayed slightly outside the circle, observing, adjusting, managing the dynamic to make sure things stayed smooth. You were involved, but you were not invested. You were present for the ritual, but you were absent for the soul. I think about those people we've known since we were kids. Everyone says you're best friends because of the history, but every time you meet for coffee, you find yourself checking your watch under the table. You talk about the past because the present feels like a minefield of awkward silences. When they eventually drift away, maybe they get married, maybe they move, you feel a guilt-ridden peace. The debt of history is finally paid. You don't miss the person they are now. You only miss the memory of who you both used to be. There's this thing that happens when you're close to someone, but there's no real pull toward them. You can sit next to someone for 5 hours a day, sharing every piece of news and every mundane detail. But your nervous system is still in observation mode. You are performing a type of labor that no one sees, calculating what to say, predicting how they will react, monitoring the tone of the room just to keep the peace. When there is no gravity to hold two people together, then when they walk away, you simply stay where you are. There is no snapback of the heart, because the tether was never actually tied. You weren't sharing a life, you were sharing a space, and your system knows the difference. It knows that familiarity is not the same as depth. Familiarity is just repeated exposure, a familiar face in a familiar chair. But your system only attaches to true safety, the kind of safety where you don't have to adjust your breathing just to be accepted. When that safety is missing, even if the person is good, even if there is no conflict, something in you stays reserved. It stays in a read-only mode. You watch, you listen, you respond, but you don't imprint. I've been in those dinner parties where I was charming, engaged, and the life of the table. People leave thinking, I love that person. But I get in my car, and I exhale so deeply, it feels like my lungs are collapsing. I don't miss any of those people the next day, because I wasn't with them. I was performing for them, and performance is weightless. Weightless things drift away without leaving a trace. Many of us carry a hidden guilt for this. We look at old photos and wonder if we're broken. We watch movies about lifelong bonds and feel like an imposter because we don't feel that weight. We ask ourselves, am I incapable of love? Why don't I care that they're gone? But your nervous system is brutally honest. It doesn't cling to what didn't truly nourish it. It doesn't miss the people who required you to perform. It just clears the data to make room for something real. So you don't miss them, not because they meant nothing, but because the connection never fully formed in a way your inner self recognized as real. You left no soul print on them, and they left none on you, because you were both too busy managing the masks to ever actually meet. On a deep biological level, you were strangers who just happened to know a lot of facts about each other. You knew their favorite drink, their boss's name, their childhood dog, but you didn't know the quiet frequency they hummed at when they were alone, and they didn't know yours. And here's the part that's harder to sit with. Sometimes that distance isn't just something you felt. It was a mutual, silent agreement, a pact to stay on the surface because the deep water felt too dangerous or too exhausting. You both decided, without ever saying a word, that it was easier to be friendly than to be known. Think about that one friend you only ever talk to about the good old days. You never talk about your current fears. You never talk about the things that keep you up at 3 a.m. You stay in the shallow end because it's comfortable. But the shallow end is where things evaporate the fastest. You don't miss them because you were never truly there to begin with. And in a world full of forced proximity, in offices, in family gatherings, in old school circles, that neutrality is often the only way your system knows how to protect its center. Maybe it's not a flaw. Maybe it's just something you learned. The space they left behind isn't a failure. It's just space, a quiet phone, a room with enough air to breathe. And maybe that's the part you're actually afraid of. The realization that so much of your life was just management. And now that the management is over, you have to figure out who is actually left in the room when you're no longer performing for anyone. If this kind of truth resonates, subscribe. This is Ego Exposed. We don't do fix yourself. We do the truth.